Welcome to the Stories with Traction podcast. I'm your host, Matt ZAUN. Thank you for joining us as we uncover how stories are one of the most important aspects of your business. We'll talk about struggles, victories, and how you can utilize strategic storytelling to inspire those around you to action. Enjoy this episode.
Today's topic of conversation is a need, an absolute need. I'm really excited because I feel like right now more than ever, people are stressed out, but there's a way that we can actually tackle that. So I'm not excited that people are stressed out, but I'm excited that today more than ever, we have different things we can put in place to actually put people in a mindful state. And today we're going to be talking about mindfulness. Today I'm joined by HARRIET STEIN, who is the founder and president of Big Toe in the Water, and she specifically focuses on mindfulness. HARRIET, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matt. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for allowing me to share my passion with your listeners. So thank you very much. All right, Matt.
And I appreciate your time. So let's get rolling because this is, like I had said to you before, this is an absolute need.
Okay, so hold on tight. I'm about to blow your minds. Okay, are you ready?
I'm ready.
Your focus, you understand the value of strategic storytelling, right? It dawned on me that I do exactly the same thing, but it's the value of being aware and noticing the stories you're telling yourself, right? So it's not the right? It's not the stories. You focus on the stories you're telling other people. I focus on the stories you're telling yourself. Mindfulness is not about changing who we are. It's about understanding who we are. It's about bringing awareness to that. So, if you want to, I'll give an easy example because people make all these resolutions, and so many people make resolutions about their health, and they want to achieve something in the new year. And no matter what it is, whether it's health related, weight related, fitness related, or it's their goals and objectives at work, that usually takes weeks or months to, attain that. The thing is with mindfulness, it's all about paying attention moment by moment with non-judgment. So even if I do an hour program, I always tell people if they pay attention, like right now, if your listeners pay attention now to this podcast, their life can be immediately changed. This doesn't take weeks or months or years to learn.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up. And you make an unbelievably valuable point that sometimes the most important stories we tell are the ones we tell ourselves. And we get in these mind loops of anxiety, right? Because a lot of times we're reliving past experiences, whether it's childhood trauma or whether it's a negative experience that happened at work or with a family member, and we're replaying over and over and over again. So we're not living in the present moment, we're living in the past, and it's literally eating ourselves alive. And I don't care who the person is. I don't care if they are a CEO of a large corporation. I don't care if they are a sales representative or if they don't have a lot of people that report to them. If they're a solopreneur, this could literally eat us alive if we let it. So I'm really happy that we're diving in this conversation. I had mentioned to you earlier, I truly believe that mindfulness was viewed as a luxury to companies in the past, and now it's a need. It's not a want anymore, it's a need, because people are more stressed out, burned out, more flustered, frustrated than they've ever been before. And they need to be in the present moment to try to live in the here and now, experience the good now, and not be thinking about the past or not be living in the future, right? We don't live in the future, right? Like we do different things that set our future up, but the future is not now, it's here. So what is like a practical step? Sometimes people are afraid of the word mindfulness. There's different pictures that they have in their mind that come up. So I guess let's start there. So everyone thinks in different pictures. So what would your picture be when someone says mindfulness? What's the picture that you paint for them on what you know mindfulness is?
So I that is such a wonderful way to get people to understand this. So first, I'm going to tell them what it's not. So I'm going to invite your listeners, picture candles, and now picture you throwing candles out the window. Okay. And then picture mindfulness and calm music and throw that out the window. Okay. This has nothing to do about religion. We're not lighting any candles. It's not about that. Picture the book and people you've heard talk about mindfulness is about being happy. Throw happy out the window. Okay. This is nothing to do with happy. Mindfulness is about being authentic. So the picture I paint for people is being in the moment. And no matter what you feel right now, maybe you feel relaxed, maybe you feel hungry, maybe you feel tired. Our emotions change moment by moment. With mindfulness, we're not trying to achieve anything. Like we're not trying to get to some special state out, there, because, I've seen this cartoon in many different ways. I just saw it again yesterday with the New Yorker, where everybody always thinks that everybody else has it together. Like they're the only one that is struggling. They're the only one that's exhausted. They're the only one that has had it with this global pandemic, right? So the picture I try to really paint for people is that they are enough, no matter what they are doing right now. That, my first teacher was John Kabat-Zinn, and he used to always say, and I'm sure he still does, that if you are alive, there is more right with you than wrong with you. So, I believe 2022 is going to be all about self-care. And like you said, now more than ever, mindfulness has been such a serious practice for years, because the Harvard Business Review has probably written 50 articles on the value of this practice.
Yeah, and I think more and more people are finding out, not necessarily because they want to, but because they need to. Like they've tried everything else, and now they're waking up to the fact that like this is something they need to do now. It's not something they can continue to put off. I appreciate what you said, a lot of what you said, and there's definitely some things to unpack with what you said. You did say that they are enough, and I completely agree with that. I think that's very valid. Like we just have to realize that we can't be everything to everybody. We are enough. But also, one of the things that I was fascinated with is it wasn't until I started speaking and going into different environments where I put people on pedestals where I realized that everyone has some level of an inferiority complex. So what has been fascinating to me is I've had the opportunity to speak to men and women that are unbelievable leaders. Like I put them like far above, and I realized like everyone has a little bit of an inferiority complex, especially now with what's happening the last few years, because no one's been here before. There's no playbook. There's no manual on how to get through what we've been through. How do we get out of this? There's none of that. And really, back to your point, all we have is the here and now. All we have is to actually be in the present moment. And some people may question, like, why am I talking about this on this podcast, Stories with Traction? Well, one of the most powerful things I believe in the world is sharing our stories. That's a way that we can persuade and connect with people and be vulnerable and be authentic. And again, one of the things you mentioned, one of the most important stories you can tell is the one you tell yourself. But in addition to that, when you're sharing a story, when you're actually connecting with a human being, you have to be in the present moment. If you truly want to make an impact on that life, you can't be thinking about what you're going to have for dinner later that night. You can't be thinking about what you're going to be doing over the weekend. Like you have to be focused, connecting with that person. And I see so many people missing that opportunity due to technology. We're addicted to our phones. We're addicted to our screens. Our head is constantly in another spot. And what that does is it completely destroys our ability to connect with other human beings. And it's so dangerous, right? It's so dangerous. I mean, leaders talking about winning the talent war and inspiring their staff, they're not going to do that if they're not connecting. We're not going to be able to actually have those meaningful relationships. So I really appreciate a lot of what you said and the self-care, because we really need to focus on that self-care. If we burn ourselves out, we're not going to be anything to anybody, right? So I really appreciate you mentioning that. All right, so we have the picture, right? So what are some practical steps people can do? They just hear this podcast. They understand the picture now. What's a practical step that they can do to implement mindfulness in their life?
So I actually trademarked something for the first time in my life. I decided to trademark a phrase because I say it so frequently, because it's so simple and it's so easy. It's not find 5 minutes or find 5 hours. The phrase is place a pause. You just have to place a pause. And it is literally the difference between everything in our lives. It's the difference between being able to respond and react. A Fortune 100 company you would know well, a couple of years ago, had 2 salespeople in their cars die. So they were like, you know what? No more meetings in cars. And yet, how many of us are still, actively trying to participate in a meeting while we are driving, right? We practice mindfulness as if our life depends on it, because our life depends on it. Right? That when you're driving down the street and that cell phone rings, right? Or we hear that notification. And I just saw, I think it was yesterday, you posting on LinkedIn about the value of shutting off the notifications on your phone. Did you just do that?
I did.
See that? I remember. I follow you on LinkedIn, Matt, and it's a value. I think that when you post things, they should be of value. I'm the same way. So it is noticing these stories that go through in our head, and they go through fast, right? So, I got an email that said a CEO wanted to see me in his office. The first thing the story that went through my head was, oh my goodness, I'm going to be fired. Okay. The second story that went through my head was, I don't work at this company. Okay. And I thought, I've never been fired in my life. And yet that was the storyline that immediately went across my brain. So, how do we immediately bring this into our lives is by placing this pause. So before we go into a meeting and, noticing, are we thinking about a past, like you said? Are we thinking, I got to talk to this client and they've been such a problem in the past. And, I'm going to go into this meeting and the person's going to show up late. I'm going to have to repeat everything I already said, or they're going to become, ask me all these questions that they already know the answers to. And we make up the story about this person coming to this meeting when the meeting hasn't even started yet. Or we think, I'm going to have this meeting and I'm going to really mess it up. And then I'm going to have to explain to my manager why I messed it up. And so we keep going back and forth between past and future and past and future. We totally miss the present. Whereas there has never been this day before in history. There has never been this moment before in history. So one of the attitudes that I teach that we cultivate with a mindfulness practice is beginner's mind, right? Every moment is a new moment. I don't care if you have seen your relative for 30 years and every time you see them, they're complaining about something. I'm going to invite you, and this is extra credit if you can do it with your relative. I think it's a lot easier to do with our colleagues, but, to not judge them and, meet them as if you have never seen them before, because you never have seen them before on that day. So if there's something maybe our spouse or our friend or our boyfriend or girlfriend or whoever it is, or our children's do that drive us crazy, well, that was in the past, right? It's a new moment right now. And just really seeing that if you can bring that curiosity So like, oh, here it is. Let's see what it's going to be like this time.
Mhm. Wow, that is extremely valuable. So you said so many good nuggets there. So let's unpack a few of the things that you had said. So I appreciate you mentioning regarding the notifications. So I want to give you a little bit of the backstory on that because I think it really nicely ties into what you said. I have a very close friend. His name's Dan Koval. We're very close. He is a genius when it comes to corporate social responsibility. He actually was on the podcast a little bit earlier. Phenomenal at connecting businesses with nonprofits. Right around the time of the new year, him and I were talking about New Year's resolutions. We're not big on New Year's resolutions, but like strategically, what are we going to do different? And one of the things that I process with him is that I'm addicted to my cell phone. Like I'm on my phone all the time. I mean, and I think a big part of it is because I do legitimately do a lot of work on my phone, but also because everything's on our phone, it was crowding my mind where I would end up scrolling on social media platforms and just, it's a time suck, right? So I process with him, I need to limit my screen time. And Apple, I'm sure other phones do this too, but for me personally, I'm an iPhone user. They have like an actual screen time where you can gauge this is the amount of time you're on your phone. So I was working back and forth with Dan on, I have to continue to limit this. And I kid you not, I'm not over dramatizing this. Like my life radically improved because what ended up happening was my kids came home from school. I literally put my phone aside and I was present in the moment, hanging out with them. At the dinner table, I'm like, I'm not going to do work emails. I'm literally sitting here with my family. I'm going to be in the present moment. I don't need to be working all day, every day. It radically improved. And then back to your point, I limited my notifications because like it's calling out to you. Like it's normally within an arm's reach. It's like, it's calling out to me, pick me up. And it's like, if I limit those notifications, I can be more in the present moment. Back to what you had said about actually, you had mentioned pausing, placing a pause, like how important and powerful that is. And for me in my own life, this might sound weird to some people listening, but it's just part of my story. When I got super stressed, I would regularly get mouth ulcers. It's just the way my body, and for anyone listening who has had mouth ulcers, they can be very painful. I used to get them on the tip of my tongue, and I'm a speaker, right? Like my voice is what makes me my money, right? So I would go into speaking engagements and I'd have a massive ulcer on the tip of my tongue, and every time I'd speak, it was like someone was jabbing me with a knife. It was brutal. And I would get these all the time, like literally every other week I'd have a mouth ulcer, and it would take quite some time to like get over that. Back to your point about placing a pause, all I did, I kid you not, to get over it was every morning I set aside 5 minutes to literally sit and be completely still and just focus on me. Like it sounds so weird, but like I literally focused on like the weight of my body in my chair and like my feet actually touching the floor. Like, because sometimes we don't recognize like us in our space, like us here. You had talked about like, we are enough, right? I'm like envisioning myself. And I did that for 5 minutes every day. I kid you not, I got no more mouth ulcers. Like it literally wiped it away because I was actually placing a pause on it. So I appreciate you mentioning that. My follow-up question would be the beginner's mindset. I want you to talk about that a little bit more, just a little bit more, because I think some people might get lost in the weeds on what that means. Some people may be thinking to themselves, oh, that sounds great in theory. How does this actually work in practicality? So can you recap like about placing a pause, but actually focusing on that beginner mindset?
Yeah. So first of all, this is really hard for me. I'm being aware of it because I could talk to you for the next 8 hours. We are both professional speakers. This is really challenging for me as a nonlinear thinker because first of all, you've used the word weird twice, and I teach non-judgment. And I'm like, all your speakers now are listening to this going, Matt, you're not weird. You're not weird. Thank you for sharing with such open honesty. This is not weird. This is the way it is. That's what you noticed. And that was life-changing. So that is beginner's mind, because you brought your attention to something that was happening in your body. And it might have happened 100 times before. But this time you decided, oh, you know what? I'm going to try something different, right? Beginner's mind is, do we wake up every morning and before we get out of bed think, oh, I'm going to have to deal with this person today, and I'm going to have to deal with that person today. And do we do that? Or do we say, you know what? It's a fresh new day. I might get out of bed right now, look at my phone, and find out that I've won the lottery, right? We don't know what's going to happen. Like, we think we spend all this time planning, right? Or worrying about the future when we have no idea. If we could tell the future, we would have all won the lottery by now, right? So beginner's mind is realizing that, so that before you get out of bed, it's a new day. It's a new beginning. It's a new, fresh moment. I was speaking for a group because I want to address something that you said that's so important about the phones. First of all, they were created in a way to addict us. There's a whole movie about that's excellent. That's a documentary, right? So in no way should we be judging ourselves if we are closely attached to our phones, because they were supposed to be. That's the way they were created, right? So I was giving a presentation in New York City, and one of the people in the room told me that they were at their child's soccer game. Their child is 13 years old, and their son was out on the field playing, and they were looking at their phone. And they would occasionally look up and wave, and then they would look back at their phone. And during the game, not after the game, during the game, their son ran off the field and up into the stands and ripped the phone out of his mother's hand and said to her, "You're supposed to be here for me." And I was like, wow, you're supposed to be here for me. And so frequently people are saying, oh, kids are addicted to their phones, or 20-year-olds are addicted to their phones. No, I see 80-year-olds addicted to their phones. Everybody has become way too attached to these phones. And, there's this wonderful book, another person who's a professional speaker by the name of Catherine Price, who wrote this wonderful, small, little, valuable book called How to Break Up with Your Phone. So, yeah, it's a wonderful book.
How to break up with your phone.
How to break up with your phone. Actually, a New York Times reporter reached out and asked her to help him break up with his phone. So you can read about the success he had.
Wow, interesting. Yeah, you're absolutely right. It's a multi-generational addiction. It's millennials, Gen Xers, baby boomers. Everyone's addicted to their phone.
But that just shows how brilliant the developers were.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So.
Yeah. And it's horrifying to think about, but based on what you're saying, there's a way to combat that. There's a way to actually, it can be done. I was a huge phone addict myself, and I feel like if I can do it, anyone can do it by limiting screen time, by setting checks and balances in place with notifications. I truly believe anyone can do it. And you got to build the habit, right? You got to start to experience life again. One of the things that I'm a huge documentation person. So I love documenting different things. I love experiences. And especially when I travel, I love looking at these different experiences. And I was looking back on last year, and the thing that really stood out to me the most was the thing I catered for more than ever before in 2021 was nature. All the pictures that I loved and I documented the most was when I was by a mountain, or when I was by a stream, or when these picturesque trees. And I think a big part of it was because it forced me to pause. It forced me to be there, because especially Mount Rainier, I was in Seattle quite frequently last year, and I love going to places where you're just looking up at Mount Rainier, and it's I don't want to look at my phone. This is heavenly in a way, where I'm looking up and I'm just sitting there. I remember sitting there for 45 minutes just staring out the mountain, and it was I walked away from that experience feeling so refreshed, so revived, so energetic. So what you're saying actually works. It's not theory. It actually does happen in reality. So I want to go a little bit deeper with this, because we're talking reality here. A lot of people are not doing well.
Mhm.
So there are some really serious addictions that have like skyrocketed in the last couple of years. I mean, and Phil, whatever picture people have in their mind of what addiction is,
Mhm.
yes, because all addictions are up. But a lot of people now that I think they're so stressed out, they're trying to handle their stress with very, very unhealthy substances, alcohol, right? So numbing one's mind with alcohol. Doesn't matter who they are, like this affects everyone. What happens when that is going on? Can they fill it with what you're saying regarding place a pause? Have you seen that? Have you seen transformation where someone they really latch onto an addiction, but really what they can do is they can really focus on what you're talking about regarding mindfulness? Have you seen that in real life?
Yes. Yes. So I'm going to address it in two ways. One, I want to go back to the incredibly critically important thing that you said a few moments ago, because I don't know whether you realized it, but you linked the mind and body. So I'm going to go back to that in a moment. But first, I want to say yes, because with mindfulness, when you place a pause, I invite people to notice the trigger, that they get that email or they get that text message, and to notice, place that pause in that moment to notice what is the story going on in your head. In Weight Watchers, right? I was born on Weight Watchers. I will die on Weight Watchers. In Weight Watchers, they teach you it's not what you are eating, it is what is eating you. So before I reach for something that is not healthy, right, I'm going to say to myself, oh, am I hungry, or why am I reaching for something? If it is 11 o'clock in the morning and you're thinking to yourself, oh, I would love to have a cold beer, I can't wait to have a glass of wine tonight, or somewhere in the world, it's a cocktail hour, right? Once again, I invite people to notice in that moment, right? That trigger, because you are being triggered. And, I've been a nurse now for over 30 years. So, I began my career as that. So to me, that whole mind-body correlation is extremely important. I teach this practice because of one word, disease, dis-ease. Mindfulness promotes ease. So what you said right now, a few minutes ago, you noticed that the mouth ulcers, right? You noticed it. And the way, because the mind and body work together, you didn't go to a doctor or get put on medication. You didn't go down that path. What you did was you placed the pause at the beginning of your day before everything starts going, before that train leaves the station, and you just sat. That is sitting meditation. People make meditation out to be so much more than it is. But it is literally just sitting and noticing what it feels like in your body, noticing the weight of your body on the back of your legs, noticing, where your feet and how they're feeling with what they're resting on, noticing if your shoulders are up around your ears or if they're in a neutral position, noticing your breathing and not changing or manipulating your breathing, just noticing it. How when you inhale, your chest rises, and how when you exhale, it just naturally falls back down. When you said being in nature was so impactful for you, right? I had a colleague, who went to Hawaii. When he came back, I know he went with his family. I was like, how was Hawaii? How was the trip? And he said, it was great. I said, did your wife have a good time? What did she think? And he said, oh, she wasn't there. And I said, oh, I thought the whole family was going. And he was like, oh no, she was on her phone the whole time. So here's the thing, Matt, because I've been to Mount Rainier because I have family out there. You chose to make that memory. You chose to not be looking at your phone when you're in nature. And you don't have to go to the top of a mountain to have that impact, because all these people listening to you right now, and to hopefully me, can walk outside their door, right? And they can look up at the sky with beginner's mind, because they've never seen it before in this moment on this day, because it's never happened before. And notice, I have a skylight in my office, right? That sky is constantly changing. And just using all of your senses. When you open the door, what does it smell like, right? What is the temperature like? And not judging it as good or bad. Hey, it's too cold, or it's too this, or it's too that, or I wish it was spring, or I wish it was that. Just letting all that go and just being right in the present moment. If you Google mind body, reaction, you're going to find millions of documents showing the impact of how the mind and the body work together.
Sure. Wow. I think it was really powerful what you said. You had said about that. So this is what Weight Watchers teach
Oh, yeah.
us?
Yeah.
What you said, not what you're eating, it's what's eating you.
Right. It's
I think
a story.
it's so powerful because we don't realize that there's a deeper root attached to what's happening. So like for me, I've shared this quite frequently with my audience, especially on social media, that 2020 was a rough year. And I mean, 2021 wasn't a walk in the park either. But one of the things that I really noticed was I was really using food to kind of fill that stress void. And I would go up in my kitchen. Now, a lot of us are working from home, right? So it's even worse. I go up in my kitchen and it's almost like I don't even realize it until I'm about halfway through the bag of potato chips, where like I look down and I'm like, wait, for these moments, that's when I was pausing. That's why I was doing it, because I can check out for those moments, and I did it through food. But what I'm hearing you say is you can do this all the time. It doesn't need to be with food. It doesn't need to be at the top of a mountain. It doesn't need to be any of that. It could be something as simple as when I was driving my son to school the other day, and I'm looking up and it's this most amazing picturesque pink sky. I'd never seen the clouds like they were. And it's just being mindful of that. This is beautiful. This is absolutely stunning. I remember pulling the car aside and just like telling my son, like, let's just look at this for a couple of moments, because it's just so gorgeous. We weren't in Hawaii. You just mentioned we weren't in these places that people think of when you think beauty. I was, close by where my house was, but there's beauty all around us. So I think what you're saying is very, very, very important from a growth perspective too, because like you end up being more grateful. Do you think gratefulness and mindfulness are tightly woven?
Oh, it's one of the attitudes I teach. There are basically 9 attitudes you cultivate with a mindfulness practice, and gratitude, generosity, they're all part of the attitudes that I teach when I teach programs. Exactly what you said about, life is made up of these little moments, right? It's just these little moments that we remember forever. The manager who acknowledges us and tells us we did a great job, or the teacher in school who told us we were doing a good job. These moments with our parents, our children, the whole movie, It's a Wonderful Life, is all mindfulness based, because he's like, wow, what would it matter if I lived or died? And then, he's shown how these moments in his life, if he hadn't done what he did, moments, right? That it changed forever. And then he realizes how important and valuable his existence was. So it is extremely important that we make these moments. We will not make the memory if we are in our minds, even if we're with our loved ones, right? Or our colleagues, if we're thinking of the past or worrying about the future, right? If we're in our heads, we could be anywhere and not experience it. It's kind of like being in the shower and, you wash your hair and you don't know whether you put conditioner on it. So now you go back to washing it again and you get in a whole loop. You have no idea what you're doing. You're totally on autopilot.
I'm laughing because that happens often where I'm doing something and I'll question, did I just do that? And then I do it again. And then, like you just mentioned the shower, I'll wash my face like twice, and now my skin is so dry because I washed it twice. It's like, this is not just in theory. Like, this actually happens in reality. I appreciate you bringing that up. I think a lot of people can relate to that because, again, that's the stories we're telling ourselves. We're living off in the future on what this meeting's what's going to happen. We're not actually focused on the present moment. I want to highlight what you said about a manager connecting. You had said, a manager gave you that compliment and it's really carrying you through. Here's something that I've been thinking about recently because, you read any article, read any business newspaper, pick one. They're all talking about winning the talent war. And the biggest challenge that I hear from businesses across the country is, I need to win the talent war, right? Because people are hurting for top talent. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating to me is my background's in the political space. I was a political speechwriter for years. I did a lot of political messaging strategy. I work with many, many politicians. And what's fascinating to me is, yes, there's a lot of money in politics, but the money comes from super PACs. So if you're a staff member of a politician, you're actually getting paid way less than you would get paid in the private sector, like way less. There are staff members that they're getting paid half, and in sometimes 1/3 of what they would be paid in the private sector. Mm-hmm. They're getting screamed at, they're getting belittled, they're getting bullied on both sides of the aisle, right? Because politics is so hostile, so toxic. If you're a lowly staff member of a politician, you're the one that people are picking up the phone and chewing out. You're the one that's taking a lot of these verbal bullets, if you will. It's a very heinous environment. Mm-hmm. Why would someone put themselves through that? Why would they get paid a fraction of what they could get paid in the private sector when they can make a heck of a lot more money and it'd be less stress? And I believe the reason is because, one, the politicians that they're working for, their mission is so big, but more importantly, the politician has connected with an emotion with them. So for instance, a lot of times it's people's mission because they actually see an impact. They have a specific want that really tightly aligns with, let's say, a policy initiative. And that the politician is connecting with that emotion because that is part of their mission. And also, a lot of times politicians, not all of them, so I say this loosely, but relatively speaking, a lot of politicians are good at communication. There's a lot that are, and they're able to connect with their staff in a way that they're not connected with in the private sector. So to your point regarding the manager, giving, speaking something into someone, that happens all the time in politics, where if you have a really good politician you're working with, they're constantly connecting with you, lifting you up. They're sharing with you stories that's based on the mission that you're all working towards. And my plea to people in the business world, whether you're a CEO or you're a executive manager, that you basically have a bunch of people that report to you, are you taking time to pause, to edify your people, to speak some kind of encouragement into them, to share awesome stories with them on different things that they did to lift them up? You're going to make their month, not their day. You're going to make their month. There's so few people that are encouraging anyone right now. If a manager actually took time to be in the present moment, place a pause, what you said, on their day to actually connect with another human being, live in that present moment, put their phone away. Do you know how much of an impact that'll have? Talk about winning the talent war. People are going to want to climb that mountain to help achieve your goal if you're actually connecting with people. So I really appreciate you sharing that. I think it's really important to think about. It's simple. It's not easy all the time, but it is simple. It is simple to pause. Oftentimes we confuse simple and easy. It's not easy, in my opinion, but it is simple. So I don't want people to overlook the simplicity of what you're saying.
Well, it's a practice. I always tell people it's like riding a bike. The first time you got on the bike, you fall. The second time you get on that bike, you fall and fall and fall and fall. And then eventually you find your balance And even if you haven't ridden that bike for 20 years, you can jump on that bike and not have a problem to ride. Mindfulness is the opposite because it's noticing. It's so funny because it's so easy. You just immediately can learn it, right? But then it's a practice of mindfulness so that you notice all during your day how many times you fall off, how many times you're thinking in the past, a past that's over, or worrying about the future. And then, just like that bike, the moment that you notice it, you are instantaneously back in the present. You know, when you talk about the importance of connection, it's everything. It is absolutely everything. It's why this practice matters so much now more than ever, which is why I'm really grateful you invited me to even speak about it today, because we think about absenteeism in organizations, but presenteeism is just as critically important, where people show up at work, you know, in person or virtually, and they are not there. They are exhausted. So it is so important because nobody knows if you're practicing mindfulness. That sitting practice that you're doing for 5 minutes in the morning, people could be doing it right now. You could be doing it at 10 at night. I'm going to invite people to do it at 2 o'clock in the morning when they wake up and can't get back to sleep. Nobody knows what you're doing when it's in your head. And to just really encourage people to realize that everybody they meet, and whether they're driving by them in a car, everybody is dealing with something, and we rarely know what they're dealing with. It's why this is a practice of compassion. And that when you're in the present moment, the CEO who asked me to roll out mindfulness for his company globally, I said to him, when did you get it? And he said, Harriet, I got it at that very first 1 hour program you gave our company. He goes, I realize that it gives me the space to think, right? And that's what we need more than ever with all of this information coming at us. If we want to be successful, we need space. We need the space to be able to just think and get done what we want to accomplish.
Wow. Wow. There's a lot just for people to recognize with what you said and actually do to actually be mindful, to grab a hold of this. But I think there's 3 things in particular that I got the most out of our conversation. So I just want to recap them because I don't want people to overlook them. When you talked about pausing, placing a pause, actually pausing throughout the day. And again, it is a process. You had said this isn't something that you're going to be this masterful mindfulness person right after you're done listening to this podcast. It is a process, but just while something's happening, pausing and allowing yourself to be in the present moment. I think when you had said that, I think that's a very practical step people can do. They could do it immediately and start practicing being present. And again, they're going to train that muscle in them to do it more and more to where they are more focused and they're going to see an increase. The second thing I really appreciate that you said was about that beginner's mind. And I think what has been awesome for me, and I hate to say this, like, it's just part of my story. I can tell that my oldest son and my youngest son had a radically different the first few years of their life was radically different because I was in a different place career-wise. And my first son, I was so rushed, go, working like crazy that I never actually got a chance probably till about the time he was 4 to actually start really paying attention to more stuff. As horrible as that may sound, I'm glad that him and I have a fantastic relationship now. He's 7. I think I've really repaired a lot of that. But my 3-year-old now, he's had so many moments and memories with me, and it's been awesome to see him. I hate to say vicariously live through him, but see that he has that beginner's mindset all the time. Like he'll see a tree that, the average adult will just walk by and, I got to get to my next thing. And he'll stop and he'll be like, this tree looks different. Look at these roots. Look at this. And you're like, come on. We got to get to, and I think being more mindful of that myself and actually seeing the way he sees life and then recognizing, wait a second, that is really awesome. The clouds he's looking at, they too look gorgeous right now. That lake over there, though I've seen it a million times, that is an awesome lake, right? And so it's almost like having that childlike mindset, if you will, going into interactions, like thinking to yourself, like, this is amazing. There are different aspects of life that are amazing. So I appreciate you mentioning the beginner's mind. Another thing that I really appreciate that you said, which is one of the last things you said, was give yourself the space to think. The cell phone isn't going to do it for you. That smartphone, it might be a smartphone, but it's actually, this is going to sound so corny, but it's positioning all of us to be foolish. Right. It might be a smartphone, but I feel like I was foolish by being so addicted to it that I couldn't actually live the life that I'm living now, which I feel like it's way more fulfilled. So giving yourself that place to think, you're going to have to shut things off. You're going to have to actually put time aside to be in the present moment. So I appreciate those three things: place a pause, beginner's mind, and also giving yourself a space to think. So thank you so much for everything that you shared. This is such a value-packed conversation. I appreciate your time, but I do want to give you a chance to just tell us where people can connect with you, because what you do is so unique. I do think it's different. I've seen a lot of your content. There's not a lot of people that do the specifics of what you do. So I want people to recognize, if they want to go deeper, if they want to implement mindfulness in their organization, where's the best place that they can connect with you?
So first of all, thank you so much, like I said, for inviting me here today. It's very easy to get a hold of me. You can just go to my website, which is bigtoeinthewater.com. My email, simple, Harriet@bigtoeinthewater. And all my contact information is on my website. I say there's enough there that if you Google me, don't show up at my house before calling first. That's all I ever ask. So. So it's very easy to contact me. And like I said today, you don't need a year-long program. Sometimes it's just a 1-hour program. Sometimes it's 1 hour with maybe other sessions threaded through, 4-week program. And because you get the concept of nature, when I have worked with senior leaders, I take them outside, Matt. Exactly what you're doing. I take them outside. I want to take every single one of your listeners right now on a retreat. I am desperate. So much that if I could just take them all right now, even if it was a 2-hour retreat, I would take them outside and we will have so much fun.
It is so therapeutic. So therapeutic. There's something about being out in nature that is just awesome.
Yeah.
What I'll do to make it extremely convenient for people, go to the show notes. I will have Harriet's contact information there. You can just go right to her website. I'll include your LinkedIn page. So you could just connect with Harriet. I will say though, I've seen Harriet's content. I've seen her speak. She is phenomenal at what she does. And I do legitimately believe this is not just a luxury, it's absolutely a need. So connect with her, learn more. And Harriet, again, thank you so much for your time. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt.
Thank you for listening to the Stories with Traction podcast. If you have a story that you would like to share, feel free to drop an email to matt@mattzahn.com with the subject line Stories with Traction. Also, feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, where I share tons of resources on how you can be a better storyteller. Remember, if you want to persuade with power and inspire those around you to action, you must share more stories.